This is Paul. The headphones are not working the way that they usually do. Yes. I'm thinking that somebody put some lint into the actual place where the end of the headphone goes, so that when I put it in there, yes. It doesn't work as good as it usually does. Now, I've had a lot of obstructions to the making of videos. You remember YouTube deciding that I didn't have any rights to 10,000 videos? Yes. And then somebody changes my phone and thinks that they're going to really help themselves. Pooh. But when you refuse to enforce the actual laws of the United States because of your little civil conspiracy of insurrectionists, yeah, and the whole thought of the treason of violating the organic acts of the United States of America, I'm kind of guessing that the Navy's liable for this. Now, the Navy negotiates these treaties with other possessions or territories of the United States, and usually there's some sort of special accommodation to those that have one of these treaties. Yes. And I just wanted to get all of the members of the South Pacific Bar Association, yeah, every Supreme Court of all of those nations, or because it looks to me like the United States Navy is not defending the actual treaties that they negotiated. Now, I know it was back in the 1880s, but this incorporation of a state. Now, somebody's been fucking around again, and that upsets me because I actually do like using the headphones. Yes. But since you won't enforce the laws, I just wanted you to know that any state of the United States that causes the United States Navy to renege on any of the actual obligations of the organic acts of any possession or territory of the United States of America because of their refusal to enforce the RCWs necessary to issue court orders. Yes, their refusal to enforce court rules. Yeah. Their refusal to enforce state laws. Pooch. Statutes. WACs. And then there's the state constitutions. Now, in the last 4 days, we talked a little bit about the Enablement Act. Yes, that's what states get to do before they become states. Yes. And then we talked about all that land that we've set aside for those Americans that think America's beautiful. Then we talked about the Guamanian Organic Act and how Benjamin was born on Guam, and there were certain, well, special conditions of having a birth of a child in an actual territory of the United States. When we were on Guam, a lot of persons would, well, they'd be tourists, and then they'd accidentally give birth to a child. And I remember there was some South Koreans when we were living at the Tamuning Plaza. They decided to travel to Guam a week before birth, and boom, the baby was born in a U.S. territory, probably giving the parents from South Korea some special rights to immigrate to the United States through these very. Now, why don't you get me every immigrant of the United States since 1888, Samoa? And then, why would it be that Asian individuals or any person from anywhere in the world would want to travel on vacation and get that special visa that seems to be a little easier to get? Oh, in fact, I'd like to know the tourist visas of every location of the United States for the last 60 years, and all of those that thought, well, we're going to visit the United States, we're going to go to Guam. Like 650,000 Japanese visit Guam each year. Some of them might go to the Fijis. Some of them might. They might go to Samoa or Palau or one of these other island nations. Yes, yes, yes. And then they accidentally end up giving birth. Oh! Now, I know that you and law enforcement officers exempted from the application of restriction of firearms issues. I put this in here because of the 192 times that there was notice in that actual judge's. It shall be unlawful for any person who is subject to a court order that was issued after a hearing of which such person received actual notice, and at which such person had the opportunity to participate restrains a person from harassing, stalking, threatening an intimate partner, or engaging in other conduct that would place intimate partner in reasonable fear of bodily injury to the partner or child. Yes. Now, Clallam County hasn't been big on this whole concept of actual notice. Yes. And participation in court hearings. It's a constitutional concept. Poo, 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 poo. Now, this is the sale or disposal of firearms to persons convicted of misdemeanor crime with domestic violence and known subject to civil domestic violence restraining order. Yes. It says here it's a federal crime to sell or give a firearm to a person who has been convicted of a misdemeanor crime with domestic violence. Yes. Person known to be subject of a civil domestic violence protection restraining order. Yes. Person restrained by the order must have had actual notice of a hearing and opportunity to participate in the hearing. That wasn't given to me in 2011. That wasn't given to me in 2015. That wasn't really given to me in 2012 when I was on trial and you issued it by minute order. Yes. Wasn't really given to me in 2013. No. When you put it in publication and mail and the police called me and personally served me. Now that was harassment, and I know I've already told you about that, but this Second Amendment right, you actually have violated United States Code Section 92D, unlawful acts. Subject to an order restraining such person from harassing, so on and so forth, so on, was issued. Now, there's another little notice right there. Yes. After a hearing of which such person received actual notice and at which a person had the opportunity to be heard. Now, why don't you give me every gun license of the United States and the rest of the world, and then any and all purchases of guns that you can find in this nation? I mean, they might have, well, let's say somebody had a restraining order or a protection order issued against them, and they did have reasonable notice and the opportunity to be heard. And you sold them a gun not thinking that you had to. The last 40 years of all gun licenses, every now, I know a lot of Americans are real serious about their guns. Yes, they are. But the full faith and credit given to protection orders, it says any protection order that is issued consistent with the requirements of the federal law must be accorded full faith and credit by the courts of another state, yes, an Indian tribe, or territory. The protection order is consistent with the federal requirements if the issuing court had jurisdiction over the parties and the matter under the law of that state, Indian tribe, or territory. Yes. And reasonable notice and opportunity to be heard are given to the person against whom the order is sought sufficient to protect that person's right to due process. Yes. Now, ex parte orders are covered by these provisions. Yes. If notice and opportunity to be heard is provided within the time required by the state, tribal government, or territorial law. That in Washington state allows for 14 days. Yes, it does. It doesn't allow for 40 days, Brent Basden. It doesn't allow for you to issue dissolutions of marriage 140 days after a declaration of mailing. It doesn't allow for you to issue dissolutions of marriage where there was no actual proof of service after you issued them. It doesn't allow for you to serve somebody other than the respondent, the use of forgeries, the use of fraud on the court, or the use of court orders where the petitioner herself did not acknowledge them. Now, if I find out that any court as depriving Americans of the right to keep and bear arms because you did not give them, it's going to be a Second Amendment lawsuit for violating my rights, yes, and the rights of any and all Americans, any and all American citizens. Now, I'm going to go through all of those restraining orders and all those protection orders, and then I'm going to find out if you gave them actual notice and opportunity to be heard. Or did you do what you did to me? Pooch, you decided to issue it when I wasn't a resident of Washington State? Yes. You decided to issue a dissolution of marriage that does include some protection order conditions? Yes. Without any actual notice. Now I know. I'm going to sue every state of the United States. I think the United States Army has some obligation to enforce the rights of individuals in each and every county and state of the United States, the right to keep and bear arms. And when you continue to reissue protection orders, yes, first you violated in 2011, then you issued a dissolution of marriage where I was arrested at the same moment and served, yes. Then you allowed for a contempt toward default dissolution of marriage, yes. And then, well, it's one of those multi-billions where every time I find a court decided that they were, it's gonna be a multi-billion-dollar day. Now I'm gonna want to know every immigrant because of tribal, territorial law. Every treaty of the United States where the United States Navy administered the treaty to any South Pacific island or any island nation anywhere in the world that guaranteed them that they would support and defend their right to keep and bear arms. They would support their right to immigrate to the United States with the guaranteed protections. It's different than naturalization. Yes, it is. Because it is different than naturalization. It's an immigration question. Now, I know you had to fuck up my phone, but when according full faith and credit order issued another state, tribe, territory, notice party against whom the order was issued and is not. I want my sons, you stupid fuckers. And I'm very upset that you don't realize the magnitude of the crime.